We move now into Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is going to have us dealing with multiple lines. So in Chapter 1, we learned about lines again. Chapter 2, we learned how to make linear models and how slope was the rate of change of those models. In Chapter 3, we're going to be working with multiple models at the same time, or multiple lines at the same time. So the first thing we want to do is use graphs to solve systems. I'm going to teach you some techniques here that are going to come in really handy throughout the rest of the course. But first thing we want to do is we want to look at our data set. So F of t and G of t are the market shares of light vehicle sales that are Toyota vehicles and General Motors vehicles respectively. Reasonable models are, and then we've got to find the models. Okay, so we're missing one and I found the other, but I'm actually going to show you how to do both. Let me pull up my calculator here. All right, first thing I want to do is I want to go to Stat and I want to go to Edit. Now, I have some old stuff in there that I want to get rid of, but before I even begin to type, I want to think about one thing, which is that I don't actually want the year here. They gave me a starter year right there. See it? Right? So the starter year is 1990. I need to use that fact in order to solve my problem here. Oops. There we go. Hold on one second. I just gotta kind of put this together so that way it doesn't quite make such a mess. There we go. All right, so let's make a note. Note, starter year equals 1990. You always want to look for that. And if they don't give it to you, you got to make it up yourself. I mean, you don't have to, but I would highly recommend it. So we need t. T is our actual value. So we need 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. Cool. So when I go to the calculator, I press Stat, I pressed Edit, number 1, Enter. And then I'm clearing out the old stuff. So I go up, press Clear, Enter, and it makes it blank. Go over to the left, up, Clear, Enter. Now it's all blank. And now I'm going to type 7, Enter, 9, Enter, 11, Enter, 13, Enter, 15. Right? Now if I want to find the Toyota one, I would type 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. And I'm going to be tricky, and I'm actually going to do GM as well. 30, 29, 28, 28, 27. All right, so I've got the years here. I'll make a note to myself, and so you should too. This is L1, Toyota is L2, and GM is L3, and we ignore the year because we don't really need it after we got the T's out of it. So this column and this column and this column, these are the ones I actually entered into. I'll just lightly shade them in gray so you can see them. Those are the ones I actually put in the calculator. All right, so then I go to Stat, Calculate. I pick number 4, linear regression, and I'm working on the old system here. So it's saying linear regression, blink, 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 and it's waiting for me. If I just press Enter, it'll find the one for GM. See, 0.65, there's the 0.65, 3.25, 3.25. And remember, we can ignore R squared and R. If they don't show up on your calculator, that's totally fine. If they do, that's fine. You can ignore them. We're not working with that in this class. Okay, so the calculator by default does linear regression with L1 and L2. So it will automatically do the Toyota one because that's year and Toyota. But if you want GM, you have to do one of two things. Either you have to delete the Toyota out of there and put in the GM. So that's an option. Or you can tell it what to do. So you can say, hey, my X list is in L1, comma, my Y list is not L2 like it normally is, it's L3. So second 3. See them right there above your 1, 2, and 3 buttons, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L6. So I can say to it, hey, L1, comma, L3, right? That's my GM. And if you want, you can even store it, comma, variables, Y variables, function, because these are functions we're doing. That's G of t, that's a function. And then I'm going to tell it to store it in Y2 for me. So it'll do L1 for my X, L3 for my Y. It'll store it in Y2. Now, if you have the new system, X list is L1, Y list is L3, if you did it this way. And store equation is y2. And I got that with the variables. I'll show you again. Variables, y variables, function, number 1, and pick number 2, y2. Enter. Or if you're in the new system, you run down to calculate. And there it is. And while I'm on the subject, since I know I'm going to need this later, I'm going to do the run regression again. Ooh, I better type this. Negative 0.35. Oops, right here. Boy, that's a long thing. Good grief. How long did I make that? Okay. Negative 0.35. Let's see. T plus 32.25. Right? That was the blank that you had to fill in. There we go. Okay, so one other thing before I leave this behind. So I did stat, calculate, number 4, linear regression. If I don't tell it anything, if I just say variables, y variables, function, y1, it is going to run L1 and L2 by default. If I don't tell it, it just does L1 and L2, and it'll store it in Y1 for me. And that's good because that would be Toyota. So I'm going to get Toyota stuff out in Y1, and GM's, the other one I ran, that's in Y2. So if I press enter, there it is. So if I go to Y equals, just for a second, there's Toyota at the top, the 0.65. There's GM at the bottom. Right? So stat, edit, put in the 3 columns, stat, calculate. Number 4, you have to choose. If you're doing the Toyota one, that's easier. You can just tell it Y1. Now, if you're in the new system, X list is L1, Y list is L2, store equation is Y1. The new system is a little bit easier in some respects than the old one because the old one doesn't give you anything, so it doesn't tell you what it wants. So you'd say Y1, number 1, there we go. The old system works like just what I did. A little bit harder, actually, I think, than the new system. All right, then you want GM. You got to go stat, calculate, number 4, and you're going to have to tell it L1, comma, L3, because that's where the GM stuff is, comma, variables, Y variables, number 1, number 2, Y2. And there you go. And again, the new system, it'll be X list is L1, Y list is L3, store equation is Y2. And there we go. All right, so compare the S-intercepts of the 2 models. What does this comparison tell us? Okay, so let me type that up. All right, there are the Y, or excuse me, the S-intercepts. S is the Y in this case, right? Because these are both equal to share, S share. So the Y-intercepts for GM is 32.25. That's your B value. And Toyota, it's 0, 3.25. Sorry, they're both 0, comma. Now, what does this reveal to us about GM and Toyota? In our starter year, which was 1990, right? So in 1990, what can we say about these 2 companies? GM had a much higher market share of light vehicles. I think these were light vehicles. Light vehicles than Toyota. Right? If you will, GM had 32.25%. These are percentages, by the way. That's market share. I should just say it's percentage. What percent of the light vehicle sales are by you and what percent are by your competitors, that kind of thing. All right, so GM had 32.25% and Toyota had 3.25%. So they were very different. GM was much higher in 1990. Okay, so now compare the 2 slopes. What does that tell us? All right, Toyota had a positive slope. All right. Positive slope. Actually, I can say what it was. Toyota's slope was 0.65. 0.65. All right. Now, what is that going to mean? It's 0.65 market share per year, right? Because our y variable is market share and our x variable is years. You can tell, by the way, x and y from the table. There's your x, your t, and there's your y, market share, right? So it'd be that much percent per year, right? Or market share per year. So that means every year Toyota increases its market share of light vehicles by 0.65%. GM, on the other hand, was negative 0.35% per year. So that means every year GM loses 0.35% of its light vehicle market share. All right, now what does that mean for us? Well, let me draw you a picture. Actually, you know what occurs to me? Let's make the picture with the calculator, shall we? Okay, so if I just press graph right now, it's a mess. Like there, you know, I can see something. If I was on like a normal window, it'd be terrible. It looked like this. Like I can see one of them, but I can't see the other, and it's a mess. So this is where it pays for us to pay attention to kind of what our window should be. So window is right here, window. So, all right, I want to go from x min to x max. Now, x is your time, right? So let's start at 0. That's fine. But our max, our table alone gets to 15. So how about we go to, I don't know, 30. Let's see what happens. Scale is 1. Scale, SCL, means how much is each tick mark worth. Our y min, and scale of 1 is fine. If you want to make it 5, that's fine too. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Okay, now the y min, y is your market share, right? You can't get to negative 10, I grant you. I'd still like to leave it at negative 10 just because I want to be able to see the bar, the x-axis at the bottom. You'll see what I mean in a minute. But the y max, y is market share. Look at this. We get to 30, right? 32. If you look at your y-intercept right there, 32.25. So I need this to get as high as 32.25. So I'm going to pick 35. I'm going to make the tick marks worth 5. Now you don't know that by magic. You have to look at your data set and look at your lines and graph it right from there and see, you know, okay, I got to get as high as 32. I got to get as low as 0 because you can't get any lower than 0. Now I kept the negative 10 in there because I wanted to be able to see this bar really, really well. Okay, so you don't have to. If you want to make it so the y min is 0, that's fine. But I like being able to see that low. Now I didn't particularly like how far over it was, so I'm going to make this go even bigger. I'm going to go to 45 and then graph and see what it looks like. So there's Toyota, there's GM. Look at that. So, and I'm going to make a little picture of it. Right? Okay, now what am I getting at here? Well, let's see. Since their slopes aren't equal, let's put it this way. Toyota starts low and increases. GM starts high and decreases. So they must intersect somewhere in the middle. Or it's not really a middle, so they must intersect somewhere. And that means they'd have equal market share where they intersect. Poof, I labeled them too, so you could see GM's here, Toyota's here. They've got to meet somewhere in the middle. Where they meet is where they have equal market share.